So I brought in this guy who is probably a genius. I'd have to say he's probably a genius. He's a very math-oriented, number scientific-oriented person, data-driven. And he's a geek about that stuff. When the rest of us, when many of us aren't really geeks about that, but we're happy to know it. We're happy to learn it from someone like him who was geeky enough to like pull in the information on his own. So it was something that I wasn't very good at, but I found him and we had a conversation where we talked for like maybe an hour before we even recorded. And then we figured out all the steps to it. And then, and all of the links that we needed to share and the whole process of being able to find a solid market that is going to be going up so you can ride the wave rather than ride the crash. And that's literal, ride the crash, because it could be a market crash in some place where people are moving out or the schools are bad or whatever. So he and I had this conversation. It was a longish episode, but a very valuable episode. And I remember it being something that when I would speak about real estate investing in Utah and Los Angeles and Boston and Dallas and wherever else I would go, a lot of people were like nervous about finding a good market. How do we know where a good place is? So here's what I would do. It didn't feel like, quote, self-promotion. It felt like support. And that's a thing that we've got to find a way to change in our mindset.
Right.
So first and foremost, I wasn't thinking like, man, I really want everybody to listen to my podcast. I wasn't really thinking from that lens. As more thinking from the lens of a lot of the people that are in this field want to know this question. And so why don't I try to find a way to get the best answer to that question? And then when I get the answer to that question, I go in and I go and tell everybody when that comes up. So different times I'd be like on somebody's stage, maybe on my own answering questions, or I would see people asking the question, or I would be on a panel. And on the panel, somebody would raise their hand and ask the whole group of us, like, how did you find that market? How do you know if it's a good market? And I would say, hey, there's one resource that it's about an hour and a half long podcast, and it goes through every detail and every link. If you want to really geek out on it, I'll give you the podcast episode. You just find this show and go to this episode number. And it technically, I guess it's self-promotion in a way. But I didn't ever feel like it was self-promotion. I felt like it was the best way to serve them. Because I would say, hey, let me start there. So I would go first, maybe. And then I would say something to the effect of, there's a lot of information that you'll want to know to look at if you want to get a solid market. Because it could have a headwind, it could have a tailwind. And you want to make sure that it's going to bring you to where you want, and it's going to help you so that you get more of the value. So, and then I would mention headwinds and tailwinds. And I would say, you're trying to go 300 miles an hour and you have 100 mile an hour tailwind, you're really going 400. You're trying to go 300 and you have a headwind and you're really going 200. Or I think that's the right math.
Yep.
So then I would mention, it will be really hard for anyone on this panel to give you all of the things, but there is a resource. I interviewed this one person on my podcast, and he gave this, and that in a really great way. So if that's what you're looking for is a strong market, you who raised your hand and anyone else, a good resource, if you have an hour and 20 minutes, would be to go to my podcast, episode 242.